You are listening to Invest in the Future by Future Africa. Future Africa is a platform connecting mission driven innovators and investors looking to turn Africa's most difficult challenges into global business opportunities. Please note that the content of this podcast is not to be regarded as investment advice.
Hi, everyone. I think that we can get started now. It's great to be here. Good afternoon. I apologize for the weird way my video looks, having some technical issues. So just being very careful not to move my laptop around too much. Ruby, it's fantastic to be speaking. How are you doing?
What's up? How are you?
I love where you are. There's so much natural light.
This is an anomaly. I'm not even joking. It's been raining for the last 2 weeks.
Oh, where are you?
I'm in London.
I know it's gray and gloomy. Yeah. I'm glad that we were able to get you on here. So super great to be speaking. Welcome to everybody who has joined us. My name is Adenike, and I'll be your host on the Invest in the Future podcast today. I'll be speaking to the amazing Ruby. I have a lot of amazing questions for her. Ruby is so phenomenal. She's a principal at one of the top venture funds in Africa, Greenhouse Capital, and she's also a Kaufman Fellow. And if you work in venture, that's like being in the Harvard or Stanford venture capital. So it's a really, really amazing thing. Okay, so welcome everybody to today's episode of Invest in the Future. Invest in the Future is Future Africa's live fireside chat series, where we learn from prolific investors and founders who have invested in and built some of the world's most impactful technology companies. Future Africa connects investors to mission-driven startups looking to turn Africa's most difficult challenges into global business opportunities. You can learn more about Future Africa at www.future.africa. My name is Adenike Sheriff. I'm the principal at Future Africa. Today, I will be talking to Ruby Nimkar, who is the principal at Greenhouse Capital, a Nigerian-based early-stage investor focused on the Sub-Saharan African region and MENA region. So we'll get right to it. A chat of two principals is bound to be phenomenal. I have a little inside joke that everybody knows that it's the principals that do all the work, but partners take all the credit. Anyway, not like we mind, right? So I think we'll start off with some little icebreakers. How's your week been? What has this week been like? And if you could just walk me through what a typical week looks like for you, that would be great as well.
So I'd say this week has been a little atypical. I actually just came back from a 4-day Indian wedding. So wow. It's definitely
been fun.
It's been a lot of fun, yeah. So it's definitely been a little bit atypical, but I'd say a typical week is, usually Mondays are kind of a crazy time where we're just kind of trying to catch up on what's going on with our portfolio companies. I think a lot of the time we end up splitting our time between new companies that are coming through in the market that we're looking through and speaking with, trying to better understand what problems they're trying to solve. And then the other part of what we're doing is really just working with our portfolio companies. Often that is in the form of informal meetings or even ones like board meetings. And then, of course, also speaking with our investors relatively regularly, keeping them abreast of what's going on across the portfolio, some of the exciting things that we're working on. At the moment, we're currently working on one of our flagship programs. So we also run acceleration programs at Greenhouse, and so we're full-fledged in the middle of one of our programs currently. So really working with a lot of very, very young, very talented entrepreneurs.
Amazing. So that seems like a very busy week. I would love to see, I really love reading this a day in the life post that people do. I'd love to read one by you, but that sounds very interesting. Thank you for walking us through. I would like let's backtrack a little bit into how you got into venture capital in the first place and then found yourself doing this crazy balance between working with portfolio companies and new companies and helping to incubate and accelerate companies as well. You know, I know that your background is in consulting, but what did the journey from consulting to VC look like?
I think the journey kind of starts even further back, if you'd allow me. I am actually I'm an Australian Indian who has grown up in multiple different regions of the world. I actually finished high school in China, and in China at the time they were just coming out with WeChat. You know, all of that technological boom was happening, and so we were living that technology boom. And so then I ended up going off to university and into consulting off the back of that, and was working predominantly with fintech and financial services, really tried to understand how really large tier one banks were thinking about technology, but kind of felt like something was missing, was really itching to go back to working with emerging markets. It's where so many exciting technologies were starting to come up. You could see the direct impact of technology on people and uplifting people as well. And so I actually ended up speaking to people within my network, very kind of not looking for a job, just trying to understand jobs that were inspiring me, people that were inspiring me. And I was sort of connected to someone on the continent. They said, you know, there are these guys, they're sitting in Nigeria, there's some stuff going on, there's really awesome entrepreneurs coming out of Lagos. Why don't you speak to one of the VCs there? And maybe you'll find something that sparks an interest. And so that was really the 180-degree turn between me being in consulting. It was quite serendipitous. And then me kind of being within the VC world. I sort of ended up having an amazing conversation with Bumi, who is the founder of VGG and Greenhouse Capital, had the same sort of conversation with Kumi, the other co-founder, and 30 minutes turned into an hour and a half of a conversation. And we were just really excited and passionate about the same things. Really excited about the prospect of technology on the continent, what that could bring to people, how the entrepreneurs were working to solve problems today, and how that was different to what we were seeing in the US or in Europe. And then at the end of the conversation, Bumi kind of said, you know, Ruby, you're never really going to know until you get your feet on the ground. And I was like, oh, this man's crazy, you know, like, I don't know anything about Lagos. I don't even know where it is on a map. And then about 4 weeks later, I was on a one-way flight to Lagos. And
tell me more about that. How did you feel moving to Lagos for the first time? What were the
you know, I didn't know what to expect, to be honest. It was very mixed feelings. I think you're always a little bit nervous because you don't know what to expect. But also, if you don't have expectations, it's one of the most exciting, you know, periods, I think, of your life, right? So I had an absolutely incredible time. I love going back to Lagos now, and it actually reminds me a little bit of India as well. I think.
Yeah, a lot of people say that. What's
so
your favorite?
I feel very comfortable.
Yeah, what's your favorite Nigerian meal?
My favorite Nigerian meal?
Yeah.
I'm a big fan. I love suya.
Don't say jollof. Okay. I was gonna say
I love
jollof.
I love suya, yeah. I love Hausa food actually.
Really?
Yeah.
Tell me, what Hausa meals do you like? Have you been to the north?
Not yet. Not yet.
Okay, but what Hausa food do you like aside suya, of course?
You know, they have this bread. Is it momo?
Mosa?
Yeah, mosa, sorry.
Yeah, amazing. You're a real Niger girl.
I'm getting there.
Absolutely. Masa, sorry. Thank you for the correction.
Sorry.
So I know that, again, switching from from consulting to VC, there might have been a few things you had to learn and unlearn. What did that look like? Transitioning into this new role on a completely new continent, you know, what are the things, and not just the hard skills, but also the soft skills, things to navigate? What would you say some of the biggest things you had to unlearn are?
Yeah, I think being a VC requires, when you think about the soft skills specifically, it requires so much true empathy in the entrepreneur and the company that they're building. And I really don't say that lightly. I think in many, I had quite a difficult time transitioning from a mental space of being very formal, very structured in the way you answer, being able to framework everything that you do. It's kind of what consultants are taught from the beginning, right? So take a problem, structure it into a framework, and try to execute that. And I think specifically in emerging markets, and specifically in Nigeria, any plan never goes to plan. So I think it's really about being able to build flexibly, being able to have true empathy for the entrepreneurs and the challenges that they're solving for, and also being able to genuinely understand and take the time to understand the cultural context, right? So I think one thing that I really had to shake off was I needed to be on the ground in Nigeria to truly understand and live and breathe the challenges that people were facing, as simple as they were, from being able to access a bank account. I was an unbanked person being in Nigeria, right? And experiencing how to get access to banking services was a challenge as someone who was a foreign expat who had come from a place where you could literally open a bank account in 30 seconds. And I think companies were now trying to solve for those challenges, right? And so until you live and breathe that, it's really difficult to be you have no place being able to give advice to the entrepreneurs, right?
Yeah.
And it's really difficult to give advice on a situation you don't necessarily truly understand. And then the same sort of thing goes for, being able to do that across the continent, right? The sort of idea that Nigeria is the same as Ghana, and Ghana is the same as Senegal, and Senegal is the same as Kenya. It doesn't work that way, right?
No, it doesn't.
And you need to be on the ground, or you need to be able to experience each of those individual regions and countries to be able to help the entrepreneurs solve for what they're building.
Absolutely. Very insightful. I think what strikes me the most is what you mentioned about being able to just be truly empathetic. VC isn't like, say, investment banking or private equity, where you can just be really, really hard and focused on the numbers. Not to say the numbers aren't important, but because you're working with mostly early stage companies, especially, it's more a people business. You're hand-holding the companies, you're walking them through the challenges that they're facing. So that, let's segue into a really, really amazing initiative by Greenhouse Capital that I love, the Greenhouse Lab program for women founders. I understand that you were very crucial in the development of that. First of all, I want to ask the question I want to ask, and I want to know, what inspired you, to think that this is something that the world needs, right? And then we can then go into your approach and Greenhouse Capital's approach to gender-based investing and what you think about women founders. But I feel like, you're a woman, you definitely connect a little deeper with the challenges that women face in this startup and investing journey. So I wanted to know, what pushed you or what drew you towards starting that program?
Yeah, I feel like we could talk about this all day because there's so many aspects and it's such a complex challenge to be solving for. I think first and foremost, I think you're absolutely right, where actually everybody knows the statistics, right? No one needs to repeat that. We know that women are not fully represented, both in the investment space and as a result in the entrepreneur space, right?
Yeah.
If you don't have people who are diverse on your own team, if you don't have people who are diverse as investors, they are never going to be investing in something that doesn't feel like them unless they're actually highly cognizant of their own biases. And that's rare, right? We're also human and we all have these biases. And so I think when I first joined Greenhouse, one of the things that we really looked at as well was just our own portfolio, right? As I started to get to know a lot of our existing portfolio investments and our entrepreneurs, I started recognizing that, I'm seeing male entrepreneur, and not that should matter, right? Fantastic male entrepreneur. But I think the point is to address equality and representation. It's not to say that one needs to be more than the other. It is to say that actually we want to get to a point where there's a balance, right? And that, you know, the opportunities that are given to women entrepreneurs are the same, and there's a level playing field as other male entrepreneurs as well. And so I think when we reflected on our own portfolio, I started recognizing that maybe we had one company that had a female founder, maybe if we were lucky. Wow. And maybe that kind of came off of one of our previous acceleration programs. And then, and I know prior to me joining, they had kicked off one of the years, the first year of Greenhouse Lab. And so we had initially had kind of that first cohort come in, and we said, okay, well, how do we not just do this through a lab program for early stage investments, but how do we also do that more broadly? And how do we make that as part of a core to our portfolio construction, right? And so today, I would say, you know, we have something like 35 plus startups in our portfolio. And I think close to 10, so that's whatever, 30% roughly are women founders. And that's still not 50%, right?
Yeah. And it's a step in the right direction.
It's a step in the right direction. And we're so focused on being able to get to a 50-50 portfolio as well, where it isn't really about, you know, it's about finding really solid women who are, you know, just really determined. And we do have incredible women founders in the portfolio as well. You know, companies like Hezesha, who, you know, are based in Kenya doing SME lending. Companies like Helium Health, who, you know, 1 out of the 3 founders is a woman entrepreneur, Tito. And so, you know, we are working towards that, but it is something that we're not there yet. And we have, as a community, as a VC community, have a long way to go. In terms of the program, it's pretty exciting. I would say we've probably accelerated something like 75 or so women entrepreneurs or startups today. We've run about 7 or 8 programs across the board. And we also offer funding. So we run 2 programs a year. One is a fintech focused program. The other is a women entrepreneur focused program. And we really look at making sure that the founding team is either a female CEO or a female CTO, COO, one of the kind of C-suite senior execs. And I think ultimately it comes back to, you know, unless we make an intentional and conscious decision to actually invest in women, you know, we know that women also need different types of support, right? We need to be able to create networks. So today we also have a network of something like 250 women around the world who are leaders, who mentor our entrepreneurs, who even our portfolio companies who haven't come through the accelerator can continue to tap into those entrepreneur women leaders. And so building that sort of network, building the set of resources, being able to sort of guide all the way from MVP through to, you know, investment and exit, that should just be very intentional, right?
Yeah.
And so, so that's something that we've been doing kind of for the last 3 or 4 years now. Really proud of it and really hoping that we can kind of make an active move towards sort of a gender balanced portfolio as well.
Yeah, that's so important. And thank you for sharing about that. My next question, I like to mix and match my questions. So next question is, what has your toughest moments, you know, being a VC look like? Or what have your toughest moments look like?
That is a very good question. There are so many tough moments, right? I think on the investment side, I think, you know, there have been instances where, you know, perhaps we've been working with entrepreneurs for some time, but for some reason or not, a particular deal does not go through, you know, and I think you get so invested in the entrepreneur's business that you yourself feel like you're part of their business.
It really hurts when that happens.
Yeah.
I can definitely relate.
Yeah. Or I think otherwise, you know, something that I you went back to sort of a lessons learned question. One of the things that I think I'd really understood is, as you're working across these different economies in Africa, there's also a very deep cultural context that sits within those places, right? And so I've also had challenges where as a woman investor, maybe I'm not heard as much as maybe some of my male counterparts, and that's just partly part of the sort of more patriarchal culture. Not that it's necessarily justified, but I think, you know, being able to somewhat overcome that and say, actually, in order for us to have a productive conversation, there are some conversations that I am more than happy to take, and there are some conversations that some of my colleagues are better positioned to take in order for us to move forward, right? And so these types of things have come up before, which I think I've had to swallow my pride a little bit to to be able to do these things. Yeah, like I said, I get very emotionally invested into our portfolio companies. So I think it's hard. You want to see everybody succeed.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you so much for that. I think so let's start, going into the invest in the future side of things. How do you think that people who want to build companies and founders to be should evaluate problems and ideas in order to arrive at the best solution or the best fit that could probably scale and become a global business opportunity?
I think the first and foremost is starting with a problem that actually exists versus a problem that you're retrofitting into a product that you might have built, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's something that's really important to recognize. And the only way to really do that is to be able to really be cognizant of listening to your customers, of being able to truly work with your customers to develop your product. And to be able to then validate with your customers. I think your customers really should be part, the group of customers that you have early on should really be part of your feedback loop. They should really be part of that initial journey towards product market fit. And I think that's something that we see quite often, where if you can get that piece right and you can get your sort of captured audience perfect at the beginning, or if you can get that customer feedback really early on, and you continue that habit and that sort of culture of going back to your customers, listening to the challenges, even as you grow and scale, I think that's very, very important. And that also goes to say that actually, whatever product you're building in one part of Nigeria needs to be molded and changed for another part of Nigeria, or one part of Africa needs to be molded and changed again to align with the customers, the culture, the user behavior of another part of the continent. And I think those are the types of things that I think, the more you're able to be closer to your customers, and that should be for everyone in the company, right? You don't just have a customer service team who manages those conversations. Your CEO, CTO, everyone should be listening to what their customers are saying.
Yeah, very important. What are the most exciting trends that you're seeing? I mean, it's your job to evaluate companies. So what are some new ideas, solutions that are being developed or pitched to you that you're really excited about? And what areas do you think that are ripe for, I hate to use this word, but disruption?
For me, I actually am really excited about finding ways to connect the continent. So that can be in multiple forms. Number one is I'm seeing a lot of very, very interesting companies in the logistics space, right? So how do you now start facilitating cross-border trade? How do you move goods from one part of Africa to the other? And how do you connect the continent that way? Connecting the continent through payments and remittances, right? How do you start moving money across border as well? One of the areas that I personally am really, really engaged in and excited about is developing more of the SME space. So how do you catalyze the shift of offline to online for SMEs, right? And the more SMEs are able to, we have some of the highest numbers of entrepreneurs across in the world, right? You've got everyone from the market woman all the way up to entrepreneurs building businesses in other areas, right? And I think, being able to catalyze that shift, whether it's, doing things like building a Shopify for Africa, right?
Yeah.
Or building digital invoicing management and accounts management, right? To be able to enable SMEs to actually classify and record everything that they're doing online, manage their inventory online, get access to things like, working capital online. Doing these things, I think, can really help sort of leapfrog the continent. And obviously, we're all doing things that are mobile first, right? So that kind of also helps, it sort of helps the continent leapfrog even faster, right? So I really love businesses where I can start seeing a lot of connectivity, or where they're really building that infrastructure for connecting SMEs, connecting cross-border trade, connecting cross-border finance.
Another pop quiz. I know that people don't like to choose favorite, but what's your favorite sector? I feel like every investor has a sector that they're most interested in, and when they see a pitch, they are like, So, what's your favorite sector?
This is hard. The problem is that every time you get into a new topic, you get even more excited about it. And you're like, oh, this is my favorite, sector today. Next month, it's like another one that you've dove into. I definitely think sectors that are doing things like, as I said, building the SME infrastructure really gets me excited. And that's across the entire value chain. So all the way from inventory through to building digital storefronts for businesses, enabling businesses to operate majority off of WhatsApp and social commerce. I really like that space a lot. And then I think the second is, I really do love the sort of digital banking space overall, right? So it's pretty exciting to see what other emerging markets have done, right? So when you look at India, you look at Indonesia, you look at Nubank in Brazil and Latin America, and you see that these businesses are really helping shift a lot of unbanked individuals into the banking and financial system, and how much capital that can unlock for them, right? Whether it's for their own businesses or themselves. I like those types of businesses as well. I think those are the two probably most interesting areas, and especially the blend of the two, like SME banking is pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely very exciting. Okay, so small break to let you know that please leave your questions for Ruby in the Q&A box. I'm sure that you guys have a lot of questions for her, so please feel free to start dropping them in the Q&A box, and she'll definitely give you some exciting answers to those. Okay, thank you so much, Ruby. I think we have one here. So before I go to my next question, I would actually just take this. It says, how was your experience raising capital? Which sort of LPs do you have, and how did the conversation go with them? Any first-time LPs in the African ecosystem?
Yeah, I would say that in general, at the moment, our first fund really started off as largely Africa-based LPs. So a lot of HNIs that we were already working with in some capacity. And we were very fortunate enough that they continued to support us through our journey. I think the second piece is, as we're currently in the process of also thinking about our future funds, we are starting to think about raising capital from sort of family offices, multifamily offices globally, and trying to do maybe a little less DFI type of funding for two reasons. I would say, I think DFIs bring incredible amounts of value, but I think that when you are in the early stage, right, when you are investing in early stage businesses, you need a lot of flexibility in making decisions. You don't have perfect access to data, right?
Yeah.
And so being able to report things like impact metrics on a particular company is really difficult. It's also really difficult to track over time. And so I think, you know, having the balance of, hey, if we are investing in early companies and having an understanding with whoever your LP is to say, we need to be able to move very nimbly, very quickly, and maybe, you know, with you know, not as much data as we would have in other markets. And so if, you know, if LPs are comfortable with that, then that's the type of LP that we'd be bringing on. Definitely looking at sort of US investors who are starting to become interested in the continent. And then lastly, we've had a little bit of interest from investors that have previously invested in other emerging markets. So investors who have been LPs in India, in China, in Indonesia, who are starting to see Africa as a very similar, you know, context, as a very similar kind of frontier market.
Yeah, the questions are just pouring in. I love that, but I'm going to insert one of my own now. So Ruby, paint a picture of the next 10 years. What do you think that the African tech ecosystem looks like? You know, what trends do you think we'll be seeing? Or what are you most excited for in the next decade?
Yeah, I think that I think the connectivity piece that I talked about of the continent being truly connected will be very exciting. I think we'll obviously be seeing a lot more, you know, unicorns come out of the continent. I think, you know, one of the things that I think we're going to start seeing, and we've already started seeing, is companies on the continent expanding beyond the continent. So we've seen companies like Migo look at moving from Nigeria to Brazil because the context is so similar. And I think that sort of notion that, hey, we need to expand across Africa as a whole, that's kind of being broken. And actually, maybe you're now building a company that serves not just the continent, but you're serving Bangladesh, you're serving Vietnam, you're serving other parts of LATAM as well, right? So that's something that I think would be really exciting to continue seeing that trend. I also think that there may be some more, a much sort of stronger push towards consolidation. We've already seen, you know, acquisitions come through on the continent. We've already seen international companies looking to enter the continent, you know, Paystack being one of them. And so similarly, I think we'll see a lot more international interest across the continent. And I also think that a lot more companies that are homegrown, so our African unicorns, will also be looking at acquiring businesses across, you know, North Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa as they think to expand as well. And so really exciting to kind of see a lot of, you know, a lot of these partnerships forming over the next 5 to 10 years.
Absolutely. I think that a couple of questions here around greenhouse capital thesis and the type of companies you invest in and what your check sizes look like. So if you don't mind talking us through, and I'm sure that you will address a couple of the questions here.
Yeah, of course. So our thesis today, and I'm always cautious about this because we're always continuing to iterate on our thesis. As the world shifts, we need to evolve and shift as well. Our thesis today is really looking at a much more sort of B2B infrastructure focused business, right? So, and largely within the fintech space or the SME space. So I can break that down. That really means, you know, are you solving the infrastructure for digital banking? Are you solving for lending and being able to unlock capital for both retail and SMEs? Are you building, you know, payments and fintech infrastructure that enables people to be identifiable, for example, and you know, through things like eKYC or, you know, things like open banking businesses, right, where you can start connecting and embedding financial services into non-financial services companies. And then finally, as I'd mentioned, sort of the e-commerce infrastructure piece. So are you helping SMEs really become much more digitized overall? So those are sort of the 4 or 5 key areas. We also look at things like businesses that are using frontier technologies such as distributed ledger or blockchain, that are using concepts like tokenization and using cryptocurrency to also facilitate payments and remittances across the continent. So again, how are you connecting the continent through other means? We do look at those types of businesses as well, and we have a few investments in that space. In terms of typical check size, today our average ticket size tends to be roughly about 250 to 500K. That's not to say that we also are investors who come in very, very early, right? So we will invest 100K if you're a very early stage business, but we are very happy to continue participating as your business grows. So today we may invest 100, but we're there right next to you on your next raise, and we'll continue to be, hand holding you or side by side with you as you grow as well. And so, we're very much actively follow-on investors as well. I think in terms of when we look at the future, I would say that maybe that thesis continues to evolve, right? So in our next fund, we think actually once you have built this fintech infrastructure, maybe we start actually looking at more B2C type businesses. Maybe we look at more e-commerce businesses. And so, or end user businesses, consumer businesses. So that is kind of where we think, our thesis will shape into.
Thank you so much. I see a really interesting question here about what the biggest misconception about African VCs are. So in your opinion, what's the biggest misconception about African VCs?
About African VCs?
Yeah.
So I hope I'm answering this question right, but I think when you look at homegrown VCs, I think there are two things. I think you have VCs that are on the ground who are very much operators, and so I think it's they are able to sort of add value to some extent. I think that there are misconceptions around African VCs that, hey, they don't necessarily have as many, successes in their back pocket. Well, actually, we come from a very young market and we're still working through that journey at the moment. And so that doesn't necessarily mean that we're inexperienced as operators or as VCs. I think that means that actually the market is continuing to evolve, and hopefully we continue to see large exits and successes for all the VCs on the continent. I think the other sort of misconception is on the opposite side of the spectrum, right? So all sort of African VCs have really deep understanding and context of the content of the continent and building on the continent. And I think that's the other major misconception where, to build on the continent is difficult. There are lots of challenges that maybe normal kind of Western economies may not face, so there are different sets of challenges. And so I think, at the early stages, having an investor who has had the operational know-how. So when you look at, the guys at Future Africa, for example, you guys have built and your founders have built multiple businesses. They've lived and breathed those challenges. I think many investors on the continent also don't have that, right? And so being able to balance and figure out, who the right type of investor is for your type of business is really important. But it shouldn't be an expectation that actually all investors can add that value. And on the other side, all investors know how to as well, right? There's going to be different things across the business that you're going to need. And so being able to analyze and understand what that is key.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so another question here says, how do government policies affect how you invest in startups?
I think this is an interesting question, actually. So I think what we find is startups often end up operating under the radar. There's often not much government policy around a particular new so-called disruptive business, right? And we've seen that in the context of things like crypto, where in places like Nigeria, crypto has been banned. There was a period of time where the regulator kind of slammed down. similarly, when you look at things like trading, US stocks, right? That also had sort of a hiccup, but the companies were able to operate under the radar for a period of time. So I think that to some extent, when we invest, we don't necessarily, if it's a company that there is no regulation for today, that, we keep that as a line of sight, and we make sure that we're sort of working with the company to help them address any potential regulatory challenges that they might face. But it doesn't necessarily affect it at that point if there is no regulation, right? I think on the flip side, we would probably, if there are hardline policies, we'd probably have to look at the regulation and consider it very deeply, right? It's something that is very important. We want to make sure that there's success for the company, and it's something that I think we would definitely consider and make, and add to our decision-making process.
Awesome. So another interesting question that I saw was, between talking on the phone with Bumi and the 4 weeks that you had to mull over the decision, what was the tipping point that made you feel like I have to be in Lagos, Nigeria? Like, what was the deciding moment?
I think the deciding moment was I came off the call and did just so much research on the ecosystem, and every single article, every conversation that I'd had was more exciting than the previous. I'd read stories about some of our early entrepreneurs, people like Ian and whoever, who were building and shaping kind of the entrepreneurial ecosystem. And that was something that I thought, actually, how incredible is it to be part of this story and be actively involved in shaping the ecosystem from a very, very early stage. So that's something that was very exciting. I think I definitely got a lot of messages from my father, for example, who was saying, you don't know anything in Nigeria, it's dangerous, it's this, it's that. He was sending me articles. And I think at a point in time, I kind of just felt like this is something that I'd wanted to do for a while. It was something that felt very, very right. It was just extremely exciting. It was exactly kind of the space that I was working in, and I was very excited to be working with, people like Bumi and just being part of the ecosystem overall.
Muted, sorry. And I agree. I think that you just know sometimes, and there's really no single moment. You just know that this is what I need to be doing. And we're glad you came. We're glad you believed enough in the ecosystem to join us. I like this question.
Yeah.
I like this question. It says, what's the one thing you believe about Africa and the tech ecosystem that no one else or not a lot of people agree with or see yet?
I would say that the energy and the hustle of entrepreneurs is unreal. The vibrancy of the ecosystem is unreal. The population of determined, individuals who are looking to just build is really incredible. I think that that there's a very strong entrepreneurial spirit across the continent, and you see that in places like Nigeria, where people are able to just build with whatever they have, and it's actually very, very exciting. That it's extremely vibrant. So I think that's something that I admire and am proud of. I think otherwise, I think we have a massive opportunity to just leapfrog, right? To be able to not be inundated with legacy infrastructure, legacy technology. We're building new and fresh. And I think that's something that's extremely special. You only get, this opportunity to build it. And I think we're on the verge of doing that, right?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. Next question here says, it seems like there are improvements with respect to the funding gap, although there's much room for growth. What room is there for angel investors or even smaller LPs who are looking to build a track record on the continent before potentially getting fully involved? Is the landscape now too competitive for smaller investors? And what would you say is a minimum dollar amount to get involved?
Yeah, there is so much opportunity for angel investors. I would never ever say that the opportunity is saturated at all. There are so many companies coming up, and we're always very, very fortunate to have a lot of inbound pipeline that we ourselves are unable to kind of filter through fast enough. And I think that the more angel investors serve a very important purpose. They're able to take a risk that VCs may not necessarily always be able to, as a result of kind of promises that we might have and commitments that we might have with our LPs. Angels have a lot of freedom to be able to take those types of risks. And it's extremely important to nurture these young companies in those early stages. And angel investing is that first stage. I think in terms of, minimum ticket sizes, I mean, as an angel, you can do as little as sort of 5 or 10K all the way up to sort of 50K checks, if that's kind of something that's within your wheelhouse. We see a lot of founders that are just looking to be able to prove enough traction to then take the next stage and maybe raise a larger round. And so being able to get there is only potentially a 5 to 25K check to be able to just build a product or build an MVP. And so that's something that is super important. And I really encourage angels to either reach out to us or Future or whoever to be able to partner with us, because we also see a lot of companies that are maybe slightly too early for us. And we say, actually, the team is so incredible. We want to see a little bit more traction. I wish we had sort of angels here to be able to support that.
You can always pass them on to us. We have a community of angel investors that will be happy to back all of this anyway. I see a really great question here from Vivian. It says, 2 questions for you. 1, were there gaps in VC or finance knowledge that you had transitioning from consulting and at a similar transition point? 2, how do you think diasporans fit into VC? So much cash is funneled through remittances that could be redirected.
Amazing questions. Thank you. 150% yes, there was a massive knowledge gap. It took me, I would say, 18 months of being on the ground in Nigeria, working with our portfolio companies to truly understand, and as you said, shift the thinking from consulting to VC, to bring out a little bit more of that kind of empathetic, vulnerable side, being able to be just really human and very building sort of trust with the portfolio companies as well. And then, of course, from a sort of VC, I guess, hard skills perspective, I think finance, I think in the early stage, it's a little bit of a balance of both. There's a lot of qualitative measures that you also bring into play when you're making a decision, just as much as there are sort of hard financial sort of analysis, right? Often in the early stage, you don't necessarily have a lot of financial data to be able to go off. The company is barely, just scratching the surface of revenue. It's very hard to project where they're going. And so there are a lot of other factors that you need to kind of pull into it. In the later stages, 100%, I think there's a lot of financial sort of knowledge and hard skills that need to be learned, but it's not something that is impossible. There are so many resources out there. And just by doing it, I think really helps solidify a lot of that know-how. And then, sorry, your second question, Adenike, do you want to?
Diaspora,
Diaspora.
yes, 1 second, let me just pull it up. The second question was, how do you think diasporans fit into VC? So much cash is funneled through remittances that could be redirected.
I think diasporans are a major, and I would love to see more diasporans participate in the VC ecosystem, whether that's through angel or other. I think that diasporans bring a very unique know-how. One is they're extremely connected in the countries that they typically are living and operating in. They're seeing technologies that are maybe, you know, new ideas that they can bring back as well. And then, of course, I think, you know, they also understand the cultural context and the space that the entrepreneurs on ground are operating in. And so I think it's an extremely powerful way to participate in the ecosystem if they can. And I think there's two things that they can maybe do. One is either through sort of an angel network, but the second is also just participating, if you are interested, in local VC funds, right? As local VCs continue to raise, participating as a LP, for example, also gives you some exposure to how things are done, the way decisions are made, how VCs are operating with entrepreneurs, and how to also connect these entrepreneurs into international markets. So I think there are those two kind of options for diasporans that are both equally beneficial.
Absolutely. So, well, first of all, how much time do we have left? I want to be mindful of your time.
It's Friday at 6 p.m. So whatever works.
Great. Awesome. I'm glad to hear that. Here's a bit of a technical question. It says, what's your view on fast growth versus profitability from a unit economics perspective in the early stages of a startup?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think this is from a personal perspective. I think that today it's really important to have some element of sustainable growth. I think that your unit economics need to make sense. I think there are additional risks involved, right, in building in Africa that you may not necessarily foresee. And actually, this is the case in any region of the world. And being able to have some kind of buffer to be able to, you know, mitigate some of those risks is important. That being said, I think that you need to also make sure that if you are looking at fast hyper growth, what's at cost? What are you sacrificing as a result of that, right? So is it fast growth at the cost of culture within your organization? Is it fast growth at the cost of quality product? Is it fast growth? Are you just sort of saying, hey, I just need to capture as many customers as I can for as little cost to them as we can, and then we'll figure out monetization? Often we found that actually on the continent, when I don't think that's worked as well for the majority of companies. I think there are a handful of companies where that type of a business model and strategy has worked. But largely, you need to have a balance of the two. And generally today, especially when you have instances like the year that we had last year, having a sustainable growth and having a truly loyal audience, I think, or customer base is really important.
Very, very, very insightful answer. I see a very interesting one here that I like, and it says, do you take on interns at Greenhouse Capital?
Yes, we do. Come to us.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely reach out. We are always looking for amazing talent. We're always looking for more people who are looking to learn, people who are, you know, open to being able to experience new parts of not just VC, but some of the other businesses that we have. So definitely reach out.
Karen, I suggest that you just send Ruby a message via Zoom now and try and get her email to follow up on that. I'm sure that she wants to hear more from you. take advantage of this opportunity. Here's another one. It says, how does your outbound top of the funnel discovery deal flow work? Do you rely on scouts, or do you work with local or regional incubators and accelerators? Do you co-invest? What do you use as a signaling for pre-seed and seed stage startups looking to fundraise?
Yeah, we actually do all of those three. We have venture partners that and to be honest, we do have venture partners, but we also really heavily rely on our own portfolio founders. Portfolio founders who work with other entrepreneurs who are actively engaging from a product perspective or a business perspective. They are often fantastic referrals. We definitely work with local ecosystems and local ecosystem support organizations like accelerators. And that's both across the MENA region as well as Sub-Saharan Africa. And then finally, in many cases, we're more than happy to co-invest. And in many cases, we also do outbound outreach. I mean, there are many times where I've been observing a company for some time, but I may not necessarily have a direct connect. I will more than happily reach out to them, even if it's a cold email, and say, hey, love what you guys are building, have been looking for something like this, or have been tracing you guys for some time. Let's have a chat. And so I think there are sort of 3 or 4 other mechanisms that we use, but those are kind of, that is kind of the main outbound. And then obviously the inbound is through either online or through referral.
So I see a very exciting question here as a follow-up to this that says, how do I get into your Scouts network?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things that we definitely look for. One is, are you aligned to some of our areas of our thesis? And you can definitely reach out to us directly as well. If you're aligned to some parts of our thesis and you have some kind of subject matter expertise, or if you're really deeply embedded into the ecosystem, we're more than happy to work with scouts and venture partners that way as well.
Amazing. Another one here that says, how has your consulting background influenced you as a VC?
Yeah, I think, I moaned a lot at the beginning about how I had to change the ability to structure the ambiguous. And I think that's also a positive and a negative. I think especially in the environment that I've been working in Lagos, there are a lot of ambiguous factors, and being able to structure thinking, structure a thesis around what we're observing, creating sort of a little bit more of a scalable framework for the VC to also grow and manage our own portfolio companies. Those aspects of consulting have definitely helped. And then I think in general, just being able to connect with people, speak to people, connect across the ecosystem in a structured way, those aspects have also been very, very useful.
Awesome. Okay. This question here says, there's been very little activity in the insurtech space compared to fintech and banking. Is there something insurtechs are not doing right at the moment, or is there a missing piece to their solution approach?
Yeah, we've seen quite a few insurtech companies. I think one is it depends on what type of insurance, firstly. But one is, we haven't seen scalable kind of businesses at this stage. I think a lot of the insurtech space is often dominated by really large players. And so an insurtech aggregator is something that is quite interesting, but being able to sort of monetize that and scale that is also something that we just haven't seen anything come across at this stage. I think the other piece is specifically around some of the unit economics, especially when you're looking at things like micro insurance. The unit economics are so small that you would need to have incredible amounts of volume for you to be able to actually really make money. And so that's also something where, how do you have a large enough addressable market, and how do you actually make enough of a revenue, enough revenue to be able to justify, being able to scale and do these things.
Awesome. Okay, so I think this question says, do you get involved in deals outside Lagos? But I want to expand it a bit to say, what do you invest all across Africa? How do you invest in terms of location and operational focus?
Yeah, we definitely invest outside Lagos. We're actually a Pan-African VC, but more recently within our second fund, we've actually expanded the thesis to also focus on investments that have potential to expand across the continent. So our typical areas are MENA and Sub-Saharan Africa.
Mm-hmm.
We've also recently we've also had a company in our portfolio that has expanded into Mexico from the UAE. And we think that they have potential to also come into North Africa. And then another company that we've recently invested in is actually a UK-based company, but they're building, again, connectivity, or they're building infrastructure to connect diasporans in the UK or the US back into Africa and vice versa. So we also look at businesses like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that we are now rounding up, just checking to see if there's anything that I'm missing, and I don't think so. Thank you so much for patiently answering those questions. We'll move into more fun things now. So pop quiz, Nigerian pop quiz. What's your favorite Nigerian song?
I'm a massive Burna Boy fan, I'm not gonna lie.
Okay, so which one of his tracks do you love?
Honestly, all of them, but probably I love Bank on It from the new album.
Amazing.
Great. With the choir in the background, amazing.
Yeah, I want to ask you to sing it, but that might be
I'm not singing.
That might be pushing it too far. Okay.
Everyone on this call is going to be deaf.
Favorite Nigerian meal. Favorite book.
Favorite book. I think the first book I read when I came to Nigeria was Chidinuma's
Chimamanda.
Yeah.
Okay. What else can I ask? Suggestions welcome. Okay, podcast recommendations, and it doesn't even have to be Nigerian podcast, but what podcast do you enjoy listening to?
Yeah, I would say for VCs or aspiring VCs, I would say definitely listen to 20 VC by Harry Stebbings. It's an awesome VC podcast, only 20 minutes long, and he speaks to some of the most, again, prolific investors across the world.
Yeah.
And then I would say I really love listening to a podcast called Foundering. Founders who are interested as well. They usually do a multi-part series on a particular founder in the world, and they're just fascinating stories about how founders got to where they are.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. So we're going to also play a mini Would You Rather game. So would you rather invest $1 million in one company or invest $100,000 in 10 companies?
That's a hard question now. It depends on the company.
It's would you rather. So that's why it's would you rather.
I mean, you know what? If the company is if I believe in that company and if I believe in the team,
yeah,
I'm all about let's do the $1 million. I don't need to be spreading so much, I'd rather back the founder 100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Would you rather miss out on a deal that becomes $1 billion company or invest in a company that doesn't grow at all?
I'd say I'd probably, that's so hard. I'd probably, I guess you'd want to miss the $1 billion company, right?
Yeah, you'd rather miss the $1 million company that take away, spend LP's money on something that doesn't scale. Okay, I'm trying to think of another one. Would you rather have to be an investor for the rest of your life, or have the opportunity to become a founder?
Oh, I can't do that. I cannot say. I think there's something incredible that I admire about founders. The grit and the resilience, I think, is amazing. I enjoy being the investor because I get to see so many of these founders and work with so many of them.
Yeah. Okay. Would you rather have only one company, one exit in your entire portfolio, or have, many companies that grow to become unicorns, but you never exit?
You never exit.
Multiple companies, multiple unicorns, no exit, or just one exit in the entire portfolio?
I think my LPs would say one, but I think I would say multiple because I think there's always a way, there's always a solution to figure out an exit.
Okay, there's always a way to figure. You wriggled out of that one. Would you rather do like blind meetings and Zoom calls forever, not get to meet any of the founders, or do in-person meetings forever?
Always
No
in
option.
person.
Always in
person.
Okay, I feel like that was
I'm zoomed out.
That was an easy one. Okay, large management fees, huge management fees, or higher percentage on carry. So would you rather have the management fees now? Higher percentage on carry. Yeah, I feel like that one is a no-brainer. I think I'm all out of my would you rather questions, but this has been quite fun. Thank you so much, Ruby. And next time you're in Lagos, I owe you a suya date. So
that's amazing. No, thank you guys so much. This has been so great.
Yeah, I had a wonderful and engaging conversation. To everyone who is here, thank you so much for joining us. I'm glad that you guys had a laugh with some of those questions. Please follow us on social media if you're not already doing that. Our handle on all social media platforms is at An African Future. My colleague Ore will share what that looks like in the chat section. If you registered for this event, you're going to be getting the podcast recording in a few days. I was kind of hoping Ruby was going to say her favorite podcast is Invest in the Future, but we're not there yet. So we need you guys to keep listening. Keep on listening, keep on sharing with your friends. We'd love to learn, see what you learned from this podcast. So please feel free to tag us on social media. For everyone who wants to connect with Ruby, feel free to send her a request on LinkedIn. I'm sure that she would happily take it from there. And we got a lot of questions about becoming an angel investor. The best way to become an investor is actually to use your own money. Ruby knows that this professional investor life is the slave life. So the easiest way to do it is to become an angel investor. And with Future Africa, we do all the work for you. We do all the diligence. We find the companies. All you have to do is simply plug into our network. You can join us to invest in amazing startups in Africa, and you can learn more about the collective, which is our exclusive community for angel investors at www.future.africa/collective. Thank you so much, Ruby. This was fantastic. Really appreciate your time. I know you're really, really busy. And to more exits. Cheers to more exits. Looking forward to seeing you. I know that we've done a few deals together. So looking forward to exiting some of those and to doing more deals together in the future. Always amazing to talk to fellow female investors. It makes me feel less alone. So yay, girl power. Thank you so much for joining us, and hope to have you soon on the podcast or, chatting with us again. Bye-bye. Thank you to everyone that joined us this fine Friday evening. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode on Invest in the Future as well. Good night, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to that Invest in the Future episode. Please follow us on social media. Our handle is at an African Future on all platforms. You can join Future Africa to co-invest in these innovators who are turning Africa's biggest challenges into global business opportunities by joining the Future Africa Collective, our exclusive community of co-investors. Please find more information and apply at future.africa/collective. Thank you for listening once again.